Welcome back to the Soul Deep Science Podcast. I'm your new host, Trey Brock, joined per usual by Dr. G.C. Dillsaver. Doc, how you doing?
I'm fine, Trey. How are you?
Doing all right. Today we're going to talk about the passions and the distinction between the passions and the emotions to kind of start us off today. Doc, I guess just to open up, what would be that distinction? What is the difference between the emotions and the passions?
Well, it's a distinction we make, especially in psychomoral analytics, because there's a lot of confusion therein. But it wasn't really unpacked in a Thomistic philosophy. But the emotions in psychomoral analytics refer to a purely physiological response. Now, they can stem from a purely physiological stimuli, or they can stem from a psychological, psychomoral stimuli that is felt then in that emotional realm, in the physiological realm. Sometimes a physiological stimuli can cause you an emotion, again, physiological, that is then interpreted or triggers a psychomoral passion. So there's definitely an interplay between them. However, all passions are felt as per the incarnate person. So they all have an emotional component to them, but not all of them have a physiological stimuli as its source.
So would it be fair to say that with the emotions, there's, it's purely a physiological response to a stimuli of some sort of impacting reality, and so therefore there would not be much choice involved. There's not much you can do about it. It's just it's something that happens and you don't have much control over it?
Well, you can train yourself not to react to physiological stimuli, or not to overreact or act. You train yourself. You can do that. You can also find out that when there's a physiological stimuli, then it goes down into the psychological, psychomoral realm, and there is either can be exacerbated. For instance, if it's painful stimuli, you can make it worse. A lot of one of these pain controlling techniques is to say yes to the pain, be receptive to it, allow it to pierce you through instead of fighting it, which we see that, again, much in accord with the psychomoral, moralytic dynamics of receptive self-abnegation. But that is the way you translate it in the psychomoral realm, and then it's going to help us either respond properly to that physical stimuli, and that it could be either trying to escape it or try to fight it or suffer it well.
Yeah, and then that'd be where that when we talk about the passions as being a psychomoral response, we're talking about choice. We're talking about the free choice to choose the good in the given situation, to choose the good whenever there is pain involved or humiliation involved, and that allows you to suffer well. Right.
Exactly. So so the emotional stimuli is neither immoral or moral. It's not a human. It's certainly a human at all. The choice of what we do with that stimuli is. So now, in the case of painful stimuli, again, we talk about escape or fighting it or suffering it well. Or pleasurable stimuli, it's the same thing, and we choose to say yes to it or to say no to it, depending on if it's going to destroy a higher good or not. So we can see that with any sort of concupiscible appetite that we desire something, and oftentimes that's what the basis of vice and human sin is.
Yeah. I think that, and we'll get into practical examples a little bit later, but I think that anybody with a typical Catholic, theology background, obviously that distinction is not made between the emotions and the passions. And so when people think of the emotions, it's usually equated with the passions. They're seen as synonymous. And so a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, it's probably new to somebody even with that theological background. So,
it's scholastic philosophy is going to be called the passions. So that's specifically what they're speaking about. And so with the chief passion being love, and the other passions all stem from that, and how whatever the stimuli is, however that impacts what we love. So now the emotional, they do say that those all passions will have a feeling to them, a physiological component to them, as incarnate beings. But it's really that choice, love, because love has two types of dynamics to it. Love is both a feeling and a choice. So that choice, of course, then, the feeling of love can oftentimes be disordered, could be disordered. But, that's the choice to love, the reasonable choice to love, is always choose a higher good. It's not going to destroy a higher good for the pleasure of a lower good. So, for instance, in this instance of a married person, they may desire the pleasure of an extramarital affair, but they choose the higher good, which is that of their marriage. That's a simple example. But
so what you're saying is that, the I guess significant insight is not, and more so the psychomoral insight, truth, is not so much the mere reality that the chief passion is love, as Aquinas says, but rather it all depends on what you love, because somebody can be passionate towards something that is obviously not worth loving, and so that's where the sort of disorder would arise.
Right. Although right, Aquinas doesn't make that distinction about that chief passion of love, and the distinction being what's the object of the love. That's clear. So either it's egoistic love that has based on self-love and pride, or it's a love based on objective good and truth. So that's what makes all the distinctions of the world. Now, when able to do that, then I think we're also going to avoid some pitfalls that come from baptizing Aristotle, is that you recognize then that, well, okay, an action can be virtuous. It's to be very much fueled by the passion of, by the egoistic passions. Be it the Pharisee in front of the temple, or anyone that excels well in things that oftentimes it's just their desire, or their prideful desire for excellence that can fuel that. And again, it's not necessarily even vicious if it's not destroying a higher good, but it has to be ordered toward a higher good. At least lies implicitly for it not to be a disordered act.
Yeah, one of the examples that comes to mind, especially for me, and I think a lot of people relate well to the sports analogies, but it'd be the guy who on the outside, well, I mean, I wouldn't say on the outside, but who does have that natural virtue, has that acquired virtue, and does sacrifice and give up a whole lot, for a good. But obviously that good oftentimes would be your own self, your own comfort, the money that you make from making it in the sports world or whatever other industry there is. And so, yeah, his passions would be ordered towards something. He'd be sacrificing. He'd have cultivated some, semblance of virtue. But like we were just talking about, what you love is what matters. And so if all of that is ordered towards your own comfort, your own reputation, your own ego at the end of the day, then that's where the deficiency would be.
Right. It's not, and it's usually, for instance, if somebody's going to really do well, excel, for instance, in sports, it's not going to be just seeking comfort, it's more with this aggrandizement of self. And so the need then, if it's something that's going to take effort to excel in, then a person then visualizes themselves in the future. It's a spiritual effort. It's delayed gratification. It's sacrifice, but only so far so that I can eventually then be aggrandized. So, and that's what we normally see. But back to the passions, it's just that, we oftentimes have then, this is a mixture, let's say all the time, a mixture of the Imago Dei passions, which are based, again, on the image of God, based on the good and on the true, regardless of how that impacts our own egoistic self-interest or self-love or pride. The truth and the good, regardless if it's humiliating or not. But oftentimes then, we can do the right thing. We're doing something that is objectively in accord with the Imago Dei reason and volition, but it's going to be fueled by the egoistic passions. It's in front of me too. So that's not necessarily disordered. It can be ordered, but it is going to be imperfect. And then those egoistic passions are often inappropriate or imprudent, over the top, maybe want to make matters worse. But and that's not because of their intensity. And Thomas Aquinas says that the intensity of the passions has nothing to do with them being right or wrong. So it's not the stoical man, the man that only that says those things that I cannot handle, those things that are overwhelming, those things that really evoke those deep passions, I'm not going to go there. And that person then is saying, I want to live a stultified life. I'm not going to live the fully human life. But as Aquinas says, only with the passions that you can have true human flourishing. True human flourishing. So from the depths of sorrow to the heights of joy. And you want to feel the sorrow, you want to feel the pain, you want to feel the joys, you want to feel the pleasures. All that's all good. But when you feel the pain, and feel the sorrow, say yes to it, as opposed to rejecting it, feeling sorry for yourself, or getting angry, falling into depression, or trying to escape that reality through various mechanisms to dull the pain. And you can say yes to the pleasure or the desire of life without having to think that everything out there somehow, belongs to you or you deserve it. So it's that, and when a person's able to do that, when they don't get caught up in the egoistic passions, they can actually enter into the fullness of life to an infinitely greater degree than we can with the egoistic passions. But egoistic passions can't take it. If it's all about me, I can't take life. It's all about me. I can't take the fact that I go down to the depths of despair, or the heights of joy. I shouldn't say despair. I should say the depths of sorrow and the heights of despair of joy. I can't do that. It's all about me. But when I realize it's not all about me, I'm here to suggest this reality that is absolutely overwhelming, absolutely dramatic. 1 second, man, you be out there crying your eyes out. The next minute, laughing with joy. But that's how those Imago Dei passions are. You you're rational, you're clear, even though you have all those tears or you have all all that laughter. Or you can even have all that anger. And it can all be rational. And that's how those passions fuel the human person and his ability to ascend to the truth and choose the good.
So the passions, we can say, fuel the intellect. The passions fuel the will. That's how we would properly understand them.
Yes, it's an intensification. You see that when you have that love, when you're focused in on that love very intensely, and so it's going to heighten one's clarity and effectiveness as well, if it's prudent. So, and that when the passions derives from the reason and volition from the Imago Dei and are not a reaction of the ego, then they're apt to be prudent. And, so here you turn your cheek, there you punch him in the nose. Both righteous, just acts, and depending on the circumstances. So it's but that's what the ideal then is, that the human person should be fully passionate, fully alive, not afraid of the depths of sorrows, not afraid of the heights of joy. And because the joys themselves, though, make those sorrows more poignant still, and vice versa. So people are afraid to live fully. It hurts too much. It does hurt too much, unless you allow that hurt to do what it does, and that is decrease that pride and self-love, so that the Imago Dei matures and dominates. The human person reaches its full natural potential that way.
I think that in the sort of hedonistic world that we live in, the morally relativist world where everybody is just doing whatever they want because it feels good, the natural response for people of goodwill kind of does tend towards that stoical mindset. But what you're saying, what we're talking about here, is that really is just a coping mechanism. It's seeing the evil in the world and saying, well, the best option that I can find is stoicism, is, the opposite of just doing whatever feels good. But that's obviously, is it fair to call that a coping mechanism?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's Stoicism, it's like secular existential psychology, is that it is to deal with that which you can deal with and control and have some effort over. And if you get to a point where you have no ability to deal with it, or it's overwhelming, like again, the ultimate issues in life are, then, well, according to the Stoics, back in Rome's day, suicide's an option. So you're engaged in these other activities, as secular existentialists say, you're engaged in activities and you're ignoring these other things that you can't deal with. Interesting, huh? Because they say that all philosophy is a philosophy of death. This is what causes a man to start thinking and pondering and going into those areas of deep passion. But so the Stoics it's as if they go to the edge, they look over the abyss and they say, I don't want to go there, so they scamper back. But the truly human life does not do that. It will leap into that abyss, which is life. It leaps into that abyss, which is overwhelming. And by the grace of God, it's receptive to that reality, the sense of that truth, and chooses the good. And if you will, this free fall through life.
Yeah, and it's uncertain too, and I think that's the scariest part. That abyss, there's always a level of uncertainty, and that's scary, but that's where the highest good is. And so you, like you said, you jump right into it with faith. And
that's right. Well, because it's the uncertainty, because that is all the basis of our creaturely status. We're contingent. We have nothing to do with our existence. We have nothing to do with going out of existence. We can't go out of existence. So that is all basic humility. And again, what is scary, what is the fact that the pride and self-love knows that God is God and it's not. And so that's where it all comes down to. And again, this is always that lifelong maturation process, but the issue is, the real issue, this is in all circles, even those that should know better, that we've lost sight of this. We've lost sight of the distinction between our ego and our pride and self-love. And even at times, a person's Christian faith. They don't understand that, that they're not really one and the same. And people don't make the distinction at all. They don't make the distinction between the passions being egoistic passions based on self-love or a modern-day passion based on love of the good. They don't make a distinction there, nor do they make a distinction within themselves at all. As far as they're concerned, whatever is coming from that the ego complex, whatever passions are driving from there, that is me. And so if I feel threatened there, it would destroy what? It would destroy me. But that's false. It would destroy that pride and self-love, but that will allow that person to actually live as they're meant to in the image of God.
Yeah, and that's the paradox of Christianity, where you die to yourself, and that's how you truly live. All right, well, we'll wrap up there. That distinction of the passions fueling the intellect, fueling the will, and not just knowing that the chief passion is love, but the key being that we put a strong emphasis on choosing what we love, God
right.
versus self. So,
let me say this too, that don't, and if, like I said, most of it we do, unless without any ego, and I'm pretty darn close there, Trey, you know that, don't you? But so we're going to have our pride and self-love involved. It's going to be there. Recognize where it is. But then, if that gets dinged, don't quit. Enough times when we're doing the right thing, it is going to get dinged. And so it will take care of itself. If you're choosing a higher good, you're naturally going to have to die to yourself, whether you like it or not.
Very good. All righty. That is a wrap for episode 5 of our Soul Deep Science podcast. Doc, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace be with you.